There are shows with psychics.
And there are shows with doctors.
But there's no show like The Psychic and the Doc.
Your practical paranormal power unleashed.
This show synthesizes the talents of world-class medium Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer,
and street smart spiritualist, behavioral psychologist, Dr. Pat Baccili. All subjects are on the table and no topic is taboo. Inspiration, insight,
action, and fun as Mark Anthony connects callers with loved ones in spirit.
In tandem with Dr. Pat's fresh, no-nonsense, street-smart, intuitive insights. And she is hilarious.
Extraordinary problems
require extraordinary solutions, which may come from this side
or the other side. This is The Psychic
and the Doc, and it starts now.
Everybody, it's so great to have all of you join us, tune us in, and turn us on. Okay, we have a great show. Yes, you have tuned into The Psychic and the Doc. I'm not the psychic part. I'm the doc part. I'm here with my colleague and my friend, Mark Anthony. But I want to say this. We have a great show. Mark is going to do the introduction, but I want to just say this. You know, I used to say something like, I never thought in a million years that I'd be on a show with fantastic musicians. And I used to do that. And then I was talking to Mark the other day. Mark, you remember? And it dawned on me that even as a kid, growing up in New York, spending very young years down at the Cafe Wa with Dylan and, well, like we know Dylan now, but nobody knew. We didn't know who this crazy guy was. We just would go down there in Manhattan and we'd hang out down there and we just did it, right? So I stopped saying to myself, oh, I never thought I'd be here. Of course I thought I'd be here. Why would anybody spend that much time in Manhattan? Tell us about our guest today, Mark.
We have such a great show tonight. And the Psychic and the Doc and the whole Transformation Network, we are honored to welcome folk music legend and national treasure, Frank Hamilton. Frank's been part of America's folk music scene for over 60 years. And he hails from LA, and he was the son of a classical piano teacher. But by the time Frank was 16, he was on stage performing with the Sierra Folk Singers, who brought the hootenanny from California to New York City. From that point on, Frank's career blossomed, and he's worked with so many. And in fact, when I was going through the list of people that he worked with, if I just mentioned them all, that would be the whole show. A couple were Will Geer. And for people who remember the old TV show, The Waltons, that was the grandpa, the cool grandpa that always had the answer for everything. He worked with Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Guy Carawan, and he was even a member of the group The Weavers.
Right.
Yeah. And in 1957, Frank co-founded the Old Town School of Music in Chicago. His students included Roger McGuinn of the Byrds, Linda Ronstadt, Carla Bonoff, Don McLean, Bye Bye Miss American Pie, Odetta, and many, many others. And the Old Town School of Folk is still jamming 50 years later. And by the 60s, folk music was at the forefront of the civil rights movement. And along with Guy Carawan, Pete Seeger, and Zephiah Horan, Frank's going to tell us, I hope he's going to tell us, about reworking the music and the lyrics to the iconic civil rights anthem, We Shall Overcome. In fact, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. recited the lyrics of We Shall Overcome, the reworked lyrics, in his final sermon just days before he was assassinated. Based on the teaching methods of the Old Town School, Frank co-founded the Frank Hamilton School in Atlanta in 2015. We also have our guest, Bert Elliott, who is in Atlanta, and he works with Frank Hamilton. He's a producer and a musical genius in his own right, and he's been working on a project that both Frank and Bert are going to talk to us about. And now at the golden age of 88, Frank is like a locomotive that doesn't have any brakes. He shows no signs of slowing down. And Frank and Bert, welcome to the Psychic in the Doc.
It's great to have you.
Oh, thank you, Mark and Pat. I'm honored to be here.
Frank, I have to start with, I was reading in the several articles about you. You once said that everyone's birthright is music. Music is for everyone.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, for so long, music has been an elitist kind of thing where you have to go to a music academy or take courses in a university or in a music school or study with a private instructor. But we found out that music is to be shared. And in the folk music tradition, this is what keeps folk music alive. It's the sharing of the music. It can be on a front porch in the Southern Appalachians, or it can be in the back room of a bar where people are jamming, or it can be just out in the wilderness, picking your banjo and singing to the birds, which I love to do. And music is a birthright because it belongs to everyone who appreciates it. If a person appreciates music, they are automatically talented, in my book. So many people are turned off of music because there's what we call a musical depreciation course in schools. And that is anathema. So we have to overcome that by sharing music and reaching. My whole approach to music is a social experience. I come out of the idea that music is a social expression, and that you don't play music in a vacuum. And if you're sitting in the bedroom just picking for yourself or practicing for yourself, it has no real meaning. It has a meaning when it's out there among the people who can appreciate it, listen to it, and be part of it.
Wow.
I have a whole theory about people who listen to music and people who rather idolize performers in music. Those performers are not an island. It brings the people together to be able to appreciate the music. In other words, you take, say, Bob Dylan. Well, it isn't Bob Dylan who's doing it. It's the people that are bringing their appreciation to Bob Dylan that's making Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I've always eschewed the star system. I don't think it has a place in folk music. The star system is a concocted method of being able to sell records to people or to sell a product to people. And it's not real. It's manufactured. And the best music is not manufactured. It's played by people who want to play it from the heart and want to share it with others.
Yeah. Yeah. Frank, what you just said, oh my gosh. When I think back, marching the streets, gathering with people, what you just said is so true, and it's so scary that we may lose it. And what I mean by that is I can never remember, not a single time growing up, my mom was right there with us. We walked the streets, we marched, we protested, but we always participated in music. It didn't matter if it was Bella Abzug screaming up on a stage with Gloria Steinem. There was always music. There was music after. It was folk music. And we call it folk music, but it is this beautiful culmination of people coming together, sharing in song and spirit, in the energy that is very hard to literally identify and explain. It is a feeling, isn't it? But it does take people to really take it in, experience, express it, and share it.
Well, my mentor for many, many people was Pete Seeger. And Pete was the one who really brought this to the fore. He was the one public relations person for folk music in a real sense, because he advocated always that music was to be part of a tradition of of shared experience, whether on a picket line or on a protest march,
Yep.
or just on a back porch picking with somebody, or no matter where people congregate, to be able to sing music. Alan Lomax called folk music a security blanket, and I think it is. People get together and they feel good about one another, and they feel like there's hope in the world because they
Yeah.
can share this common experience of singing.
Wow. When I do my mediumship spirit communication events, when I in front of a live audience and the crowd's really tight, particularly if it's during the holiday season, I get everyone to sing Jingle Bells. And I know that sounds funny, but I was part of a study in England where with spirit communication, and the instructor set up all these cameras that detected orbs, which are spirits. And she said, I want everyone to sing Silent Night. So, people from 14 different countries singing Silent Night in 14 different languages. And the cameras are used in paranormal investigations. And so they're picking up on the orbs, and we're getting them coming in, orbs or spirits. So we're getting all excited. She goes, and she's from Scotland. She goes, oh, you like that, do you? Now I want you to sing Jingle Bells. And so we started singing Jingle Bells, and the screens were flooded with orbs. And she was explaining that even though Silent Night's a beautiful song, it's very solemn, but Jingle Bells is happy, and it raises people's vibration, and it makes it easier to connect with the other side. And what you just said, and I'm sorry for my long story, but it connected with me, because when people get together and they sing, they're sharing more than just the fact that they know a song.
That's right.
And it seems like it has benefits on many levels. Bert, what's your take on this?
Well, honestly, I've only experienced this. Well, I've experienced it since I was very young, because I was a musician at 6 years old. So I always recognized the magic, if you will, that music brings to people and situations. Music brings people together. But I've really honed into it since I've gotten to know Frank, and Frank and I have known each other for 40 years. But
right.
He's turned me on to folk, which I had only known from when I was very young, like 5, 6 years old. My brother's 10 years older than I am, and he was a folkie back then. So I was, through osmosis, hearing folk music in the background all the time. But then I got into rock and roll and everything else, and jazz, and I kind of lost touch with what is actually the roots of music, is folk, American music anyway, or international music.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Bert,
comment.
go
sorry.
ahead, Frank. Go ahead. There's something I want to ask you both. I think I read it, Frank, Bert, something you said, that you're always reinventing your craft, that there's something that you do at a deeper level of who you are. You're reinventing your craft. And I can't think of, I can't help but think of both of you in that manner. That idea of reinventing is so important. If we could only show people how to do in life what you both do in music, wow, wouldn't that be something?
Oh, that's lovely.
Wouldn't it?
Thank you. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to comment on, what you were saying, Mark, there is a kind of energy in the world, and this energy you feel on stage. And this is something that people who don't perform, I don't think they have a clue about this.
Yeah.
But when you're on stage working with an audience, there's energy that goes back and forth between you and the audience, and it actually takes its form in physical sensations. You can feel the coldness of an audience, or you can feel the warmth of an audience. They give it back to you, or you can feel a schizophrenic, where half of the audience is cold and half the audience is warm. It's a kind of energy that we're very fortunate, people like us who happen to be able to perform, have.
That's very interesting, because as you mentioned, Doctor, you're always changing and transforming, if you will. But you get in front of an audience and you're a musician and you start playing some music and you get no reaction from the audience, you better instantly be able to switch gears and see what you can do to connect with that audience.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, you're so right. And you know, it's so beautiful. I mean, a lot of times we think about this and we listen to music, but we really don't understand the depth and the breadth of what goes into creating this,
Well,
this beautiful form.
Doctor, you have to reinvent yourself on stage
You
almost
do.
instantaneously.
You do. It's funny. I can't say I played folk music, but I did learn the guitar. I played the viola
Oh,
in a city orchestra.
my
Nice.
girl plays the
And
viola. Christy plays the viola.
we should talk. But what you said about being on stage, it transforms you, and you transform the audience. It transforms you. I wish everyone I worked with, I could give them a stage event or experience, because there's nothing quite like it. You get to feel the ups, the downs, the sideways. But then if I'm you, Frank, and you, Bert, I write a song about it, don't I?
Absolutely.
Um, Speaking of writing a song, I'm curious, what is your process? What inspires you? I mean, I get the sense that you don't sit down and say, okay, I have to write a song. I don't think that's, like it's work. It seems like it has to come to you. How is it, Frank, that a song comes to you?
We're vehicles of ingesting. We have an idea, we have something that moves us, and it's deep inside of us, and we have to live with it a while. And some of us are able to take that idea and put it on paper, or put it into music, or put it into words. And we can do it for various forms. We can do it through improvisation, like a jazz musician, or we can sit down and let it just sort of sweep over us and become a vehicle for it without even thinking about it too much. You just write it. And it's a process that's not premeditated. It's something that you ingested for a period of time, and it just becomes, it manifests that way.
If you're
Wow.
lucky. If you're lucky.
Okay,
Yeah, if
Bert,
you're
what's
Well,
your take?
I have to qualify that, because not everything you write is going to be good. So you have to go back after you've done this process, look it over, edit it, and say, well, this could be better, or that could be better, or maybe that's not what I meant. Maybe I got to try another thing.
Okay, now that I'm glad that you said that, because talk about editing, I want to talk about "We Shall Overcome." All right, that is the anthem of the civil rights movement. But that song had actually been around for some time before you guys got hold of it. Am I correct about that?
That's
so
right.
All right, so tell me about the before, and then the Frank and company got hold of it, and how you guys transformed it, if you would.
I think it's a folk song. Now, the way you define a folk song is that it usually has variants, or it has cousins and relatives that are reproduced by tradition. So "I Will Overcome" can be taken out of the church, out of the Black Gospel Church, into the field where the tobacco workers in North Carolina are singing it in their chores, and they will change it to "We Will Overcome." Then something happens where it gets picked up by an organization such as Highlander Folk School, which is a wonderful organization that trains people to go back into their community, particularly minorities, and start organizing labor. And they also has an adjunct of music. So "We Shall Overcome" was picked up by Zilphia Horton, who's the wife of Miles Horton, who was the director of the Highlander and the founder of the Highlander Folk School. And she began singing it. Pete Seeger got a hold of it and put it in a book called People's Songs, which was a book out of New York that he had he and others had put together. That's a whole story in itself. But the song appeared in print. Now, I had not seen that. I may have seen it in a cursory way, but what happened was there were some people from Highlander Folk School that came into Topanga Canyon on the Bill Wheelgear's his ranch, and they were singing it. And I heard it and I said, gee, that sounds great. But my feeling at the time was it's not black enough. And it needs a gospel feel. It needs something else. So I started messing with it. And lo and behold, one of the tunes that was buzzing around in my head, which I did not know at the time, was a melody that came from a movie called Going My Way with Bing Crosby. And
Yeah.
Bing Crosby sings a song, a little squib of a song called O Sanctissima. And if you listen to that, you'll see that it's very much the melody of We Shall Overcome. And so I didn't know that at the time. And so I messed with it. And I was going down to the St. Paul Baptist Church of Los Angeles to see the 100-piece black choir on a marvelous African-American choir, a gospel choir. The only one I know today that's like it is Reverend Cleveland in Detroit. Aretha's father has a church that has gospel music like that. Anyway, I was down at the St. Paul Baptist Church, and I was so taken with this 100-piece choir that I started thinking, gosh, they sang this song called Precious Memories. And I thought, that's the quality that this song needs. So I started messing with the chords a little bit, and I would sing it around. And my friend Guy Carawan had heard about the song through some source. He called me up one day and says, hey, Frank, would you teach me that song? And I said, oh, I'd be glad to. And so we got together, and I showed him what I did with the song. And I also took Pete Seeger down to that church, by the way, and he was very taken with it. But the gospel tradition was in my head, and Guy and I kind of played around with it, and he took it to North Carolina. And at the sit-in in 1963, at the sit-in at I think it was Woolworth's, he sang that song for the black community and for the protesters. And they immediately understood it because it's part of the African-American tradition. And they picked it up and they said, well, thank you, white boy. We'll take over now.
And Dr. Pat, I want to get your thoughts on this too, because even though it became a black anthem, white boy is the one. So what this means is that civil rights aren't just a black thing. They're not just a white thing. They're a human. It's a human concern. Dr. Pat, what's your take on that? Because I know you were involved in the Stonewall riots, movements, incidents. That is really fascinating. I didn't know that. So,
well, I'll tell you, nobody got any whiter than my stepmom. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 30 years younger than my dad, had her first child at 12, second child at 13. And the best thing in my life, not the loss of my mom, but the fact that my dad married this woman and the fact that she didn't leave him. And the reason I say that is when you have a stepmom that grows up in the South and is in a very teeny town, and you go down for the first time to their church, and there is in a small town, there's a church, and you go down and everybody's there, and then there's a picnic. So at the ripe age of, how old was I? Maybe 13, the ripe age of 13, because I'm telling you, Don't ask me to sing. I mean, I got some talents, but singing isn't one of them. The pastor grabs me on the side and hands me 2 spoons. And he looked at me and he said, "Child, just bang these spoons." And I learned how to play the spoons at age 13. And I
That's
never stopped.
That's an
But
African-American tradition.
it is. And we don't talk about it enough. But the beautiful thing about what we're talking about, and this is why I'm so thrilled what you all are doing. You know, if we don't pass these traditions on, if we don't talk about them, if we don't share the stories and the legacies with people, young people, all people, it doesn't matter what color, what race. These are the things that the boldness of our history has come from. And folk music is about as ancient as you can get. Now, we're just talking about the United States here. But
Mhm.
folk music, the way we're talking about it, its roots are so deep in storytelling, passing wisdom. I mean, how much wisdom, Frank, came from the kinds of musics? Bert, how much storytelling happens through folk music?
Take it, Frank.
Well, folk music is like history, but there's a difference. History tells you the facts. Folk music tells you the way people felt.
Yeah.
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 You know, I think we should take a break. So our audience is going to have the benefit of hearing one of Frank's songs. And then we'll be right back with the psychic and the doc and our special guest, Frank Hamilton, and our other special guest, Bert Elliott.
And we
So
got
what do
some
you-
information we're going to give out too.
we are.
All right.
So everyone
that's so
stay
lovely.
tuned. We'll be right
Thank
back.
you.
I think that I could learn to dance. Ooh.
Wow. Is that amazing or what? Welcome back to the Psychic
Yeah.
and the Doc. We're here on the Transformation Network. I'm Mark Anthony, the Psychic Explorer, and I'm with my amazing co-host and very dear friend, Dr. Pat Baccili. And we are just having almost too much fun to call this work tonight because we've got 2 very special guests. We got Bert Elliott, music producer, musician, documentarian, and our very, very special musical genius guest, Frank Hamilton. And Frank, well, let me tell you something, Frank. Your career has spanned over 6 decades. It's like closer to 7 decades, and you're still going strong. And I understand that a documentary about your career is either in the works or coming out very soon.
Yes, that's true. And I'm very fortunate to be working with Bert Elliott,
Yeah.
who's a master at the control board and a producer, and Bob Judson, who's a marvelous documentarian and has done a lot of, Bert can tell you the documentaries that he's done, but he's also an avid folk music fan too. So I worked with the best, and I just went along for the ride. I had a good time. They did all the heavy lifting. But the documentary, I'm very honored that somebody can appreciate what I tried to do all my life, and that's a great honor to be recognized for that. My reaction to what you were saying about AI and what's happening to people who are wedded to their cell phones and their TV screens, there's a reaction against this.
Yeah.
And I've always been a rebel, and I'm part of that rebellion, the radical side that says this isn't the only thing that there is, and this isn't going to win, because people need the other thing. They need that human connection that's away from the robotics, that's away from the cell phones, that's away from the TV screens, that's away from the computers. We can use that energy to help us, but at the same time, it will never replace the human condition where we can experience and empathize with one another and listen to one another and share commonality with each other on a human level, not on a technical level.
You brought up an interesting point before when you said how history teaches facts and folk music teaches how people felt. And from what I've seen with folk music in your career, you guys were writing songs, folk songs that really became protest music. So that couldn't have always been smooth sailing, was it?
Well, no, but almost every song is a protest song if you really think about it.
Yes.
And people say, well, I'm not interested in politics, but almost everything that we play and sing and hear and do is based on some kind of political activity.
Yep.
So, no, it hasn't been easy, but that's the beauty of it. If it were easy, it wouldn't be that important. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that out of the suffering and out of the empathy and out of the human condition, these songs arise and they're carried on from generation to generation, regardless of whether they find themselves on the radio or on the stage or on a computer screen or in a game program. They'll always go on. Folk music is like a river, and it has so many different tributaries, and these the river always rolls.
That's a nice way of putting it. The river always rolls. Speaking of rolling, you took your folk music tour to the South, the Southern United States in the 60s during the peak of the Civil Rights Movement. What was that like?
Well, it was what Paul Simon tried to do when he tried to discover America. Jack Elliott and Guy Caro and I decided we were going to collect folk music and collect folk musicians and learn something about the Americana and American music. So we started off in New York. I hitchhiked across country with my guitar and a long underwear and a toothbrush in my guitar case. And I was practically arrested for vagrancy. That's a different story. But we wound up in New York City. I stayed with Pete Seeger on his in Beacon, New York. And then I met up with Guy, who was already there. And we decided we were going to go south and collect folk music and learn from the people who sang these songs, try to identify and find them. And then we ran across a guy by the name of Ramblin' Jack Elliott. And Jack Elliott was one of the fixtures of the Washington Square Sunday afternoon scenes in New York City. And he had a Stetson hat and a Texas drawl, and he's a very interesting man. I admired him because, talk about adaptation, he remade himself. He was a son of a Jewish family doctor in Brooklyn, New York, whose brother went to Yale law school, and Jack decided, I don't want that. So he remade himself in the image of his mentor, which was Woody Guthrie. Anyway, I'm rambling around here.
No, this is cool.
But anyway, the point is we got together. Jack wanted to go with us, and Jack was great because he was a catalyst. He was able to talk to people in the South, and so we all were really, but Jack was so special in doing that. We wound up, first of all, at Mary Point, Virginia, looking for an African-American poet by the name of John Ball. And we were there a very short time, and the Menhaden fishermen, the Menhaden is a small fish used in industrial oils. The Menhaden fishermen were basically black workers, and they would go out in the rowboats and catch the fish. And they were organizing, and there was a labor strike on. And we were there looking for John Ball, and then we left town, went down to Newport News, and that's a whole different story. But we came back, and we were met at the gate at the city's edge by the labor organizer Phil Lederer, who says, "You boys have got to get out of town. the sheriff and the Ku Klux Klan were on my doorstep this morning.
Whew.
And the company warehouse was burnt down, and they said you did it. So we hightailed it out of there. And in Newport News, that was kind of interesting too. We were on the street, and the policeman came up. We were busking. Busking is when you play on the street for change. You know, you open your guitar case, and people drop nickels and dimes. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they drop bills in there. And we were playing and singing, and the cops came up and said, "Hey, you guys got to shut it down. The Salvation Army's across the street, and you're offering too much competition."
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, that was
Wow.
the start of our foray in the South.
Speaking of rambling on, you know, Ramblin' Jack Elliott got his name Ramblin' because he just kept talking and talking. You couldn't stop him. And that's where he got that name from.
Mhm.
And I guess there was a lot of rambling going on between these three guys, right?
Well, yeah, there was. We were the Dusty Road Boys.
The Dusty Road Boys.
We played at all these small radio stations in the South. And at first we were introduced as the Delta Rhythm Boys, but that name was taken.
Yeah.
So they said, then we were singing, going down the road, feeling bad, going down this old dusty road, and I ain't going to be treated this way. And so they said, "Oh, well, you're the Dusty Road Boys."
Hmm.
And it stuck.
Wow.
Then we wound up at the Asheville Folk Festival. That's a whole different story, with Baskin Lamar Lunsford, who was the man who started the Asheville Folk Festival. And we were, talk about rough, we were introduced by old Bascom for the audience as we appeared on his program as the three communists from New York.
Yeah. No,
Oh my
totally.
God.
Yeah. No,
That was a great
that's
introduction.
exactly
No,
what
I'm-
happened.
I'm laughing because I believe it. And I also
It's true.
understand, Frank, that a number of your colleagues, I guess in the 50s, got hauled before the House on Un-American Activities in Congress during the
Absolutely.
McCarthy era. Which one of your friends got pulled in front of that monstrosity?
Oh, the wonderful story about that is when Pete Seeger went up in front of the committee, and Pete Seeger brought his banjo with him. And he said, "I won't tell you who I played with. I won't tell you who I associated with. I don't think it's your business, but I'll be glad to sing you a song." And what song he wanted to sing wasn't that a time, but he didn't get a chance to do it.
Wow,
But that
too
was
bad.
his. Yeah, that's too bad. They would have enjoyed it, I think.
Wow.
But well, Pete Seeger, Will Gear, uh, um, uh, Jeff Corey, the actor from Los Angeles. Um, there are a whole bunch of people who were intimidated by the drunken senator from Wisconsin.
That's incredible. And
Yeah, I sat next to Dalton Trumbo the night before he was imprisoned.
Mm. Wow. Wow. I mean, I'm fascinated by the fact that you're going to capture this story, Bert, that this story is going to be captured. And, you know, Frank, what an honor it is, because it's so difficult to explain in words the experience that you're talking about, what you lived, what it did to move people, you know, touching the hearts of people at such a time where most of the world thought hearts couldn't be touched. And they were so wrong.
Well, Dr. Pat, the reason I think the documentary works is not because of me. It's because of what I represented
Exactly.
in people's
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
Because we all shared that same experience growing up, singing in the streets, singing in Washington Square, singing at hootenannies,
Yep.
singing for labor unions. We all shared that. We had an optimism and a feeling of hope.
We did. Yeah.
And you know what? That's not gone. That is not gone. It
No.
seems like it is because we hear on the news and the media's so much other stuff, so much negative stuff today.
yeah.
But there's that undercurrent and it's there.
Yeah.
It's nice that there's hope, and folk music has always been a beacon of that hope. And I understand that you feel that hip hop is kind of the new folk music and the new protest song. Could you tell us
Yeah.
what you
Well,
feel about that?
my whole definition of folk music has expanded in recent years. I used to have a very narrow definition of it, which was the folklorist academic view of folk music. But folk music really expands to include all kinds of music that's related to social endeavors. One of the most important parts of folk music is jazz. Jazz is a folk music. People won't want to hear that maybe, but it's true. That's what it is. Jazz and the great classical music in our country, George Gershwin, Duke Ellington, they're all influenced by folk music. If it wasn't for folk music, that wouldn't be there.
Yeah. You're so right. I'm so glad, Mark, you asked that question, because I did grow up in the Bronx. And, I grew up in the Bronx. Yes, I do believe it was the home of hip hop and White Castle hamburgers. But, it was eclectic in nature. It was fascinating when I think about this, and I'm really struck by this because I kind of realized what a little snob I think I used to be, growing up. And I too had to expand and say, wait a minute, how can you sing and play this on one day and then rap to Tupac? And the people that ask that question have to have a better understanding of what you're preparing, what you're creating, of the stories that get told. Because if they knew, if they were part of it, they wouldn't be the snob that I was at the Rhode Island Festival that we all went to when Dylan walks on the stage with an electric guitar and we boo him. Now, I don't, because we're stuck in a little bit of what we thought it should be. It should be. You represent the possibilities of what it could be and continue to be. That is so essential right now. It's essential for the kids growing up, and it's essential for the people that are grown up, I believe.
I couldn't agree more. And the thing about hip hop is it does have a tradition.
It does.
It comes from Africa.
Yes,
the
it does.
tradition of the griots, the storytellers, the ones that rap in rhythm and tell about the tribes and the history of the African people. And one of the ones who's I think the father of protest music in this way is a man by the name of what is his name? Oh gosh, I'm gonna have a senior moment here a minute.
Joe, is it Joe?
No, his name is Kuti.
Oh,
Kuti. Anakapolo Kuti, otherwise Fela Kuti. And his home was bombed in Nigeria because he was a radical singing a rap protest music in Africa. It wasn't called rap in those days, but the significance of it is that that kind of music is part of the tradition of Africa. So it's understandable. Hip hop is part of a connection to the great griots, to the people of protest in Africa. It probably has something to do with South Africa and its change and the people that sang the songs. There was a kind of rap that happened there too.
And what it became was really street level protest and music.
That's right.
Because unless you live at the street level of life, you have no idea what it's like.
None.
That's right.
And the only way you can communicate at some point is through rapping, singing, playing, and trying to get your misery out.
Absolutely. That's what the blues is.
Exactly.
Sure.
Go ahead, Frank.
It's expiating the so-called devils inside of us. As a matter of fact, Shakespeare even talks about the blue devils.
Yeah.
So the blues
The blues, yeah.
It goes way, way back. It's a catharsis. It's a matter of
Mhm.
getting out these feelings of anguish, but also hope. Because there's a song, a blues song, things look bad here, but they're better on down the line.
Yeah.
Can we find out, how do people find out about what's coming? Can we give some information to people? You know, what is the best way for people to not just listen to this today, but, you know, connect, follow you? You know, this is something that needs to be shared. What is
Thank
the
you.
best way?
Thank you, Dr. Pat. We have a website, frankhamilton.net, which has just come into place since the documentary has been finished.
Great.
And it'll have announcements of events like today's and future showings of the documentary. The premiere showing will be April 17th. It's a Monday at 10 p.m. On Georgia Public Broadcasting. That'll launch the documentary. And
Great.
we have very high hopes that it will go national.
I hope you'll come back so that we can support you in this and
Thank you.
support the launch, because there's nothing more important than that. You know, for me personally, there's nothing more important than that. You know,
That's
growing up in those multicultural environments, I grew up in the projects, you know, I understand things. The best argument I ever watched, and I think Frank and both of you said this, the best argument I ever watched was between two of my friends. My coach, who was from Africa, my sports coach, and my best friend, who was a Chippewa, a Native American. The best argument between these two was which tribe created rap music first. The best, and I learned more from that had less to do with it. But think about the commonalities we have. See, isn't that what you've done over time, Frank? I mean, this music brings people together.
Well,
Brings us together.
that's what I tried to do.
Did a good job. Just saying.
Thank you.
We should also, if I could just mention one more thing that we
Sure,
go
got
ahead,
so
please.
so involved in all the great stuff that we've been talking about. The Old Town School in Chicago, while Frank was a co-founder, he's also the founder of the of the Frank Hamilton School in Atlanta now, which is
Wow.
Inspired by the Old Town School. And it's Frank's, if I can speak for you, Frank,
Sure.
it's really his dream, and what he hopes will be his legacy is the school and education and bringing people together to sing, because he says, if you can sing together, you should be able to talk together and solve all the world issues.
Wow. I mean, what a beautiful legacy. What an absolutely beautiful accomplishment. And the thing is, Frank, I think the word retirement's not even in your vocabulary.
Oh, no,
is it?
I don't believe in it.
What is that word? It's not in mine either.
No, we don't retire.
So somebody made that word up. Well, who made that up?
We're all creative people, and we don't retire.
I say, don't retire, reinvent.
That's exactly right. Good. I like that.
Yeah.
Don't retire, reinvent. And also like what you said about how the folk music, it emerges from pain, from anguish. I mean, some of the best works of art, literature, and obviously music have been as reactions to people's grief and pain. And from what I understand, the documentary gives a good viewpoint of that. From what I've understand with the documentary, not only does it cover your work, but all the turmoil in the world going on behind it.
But can I add to that?
Please do.
It also is about love.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And real love, not phony love,
Yeah.
not the fake love you see on TV or in the movies. It's real love.
Yeah.
Right. But see, that's what you've done. See, this is why I'm so glad you're here. And all of you, Bert, and Bert, thank you so much, because this is a conversation that we do not have enough of. You're right. We went through times and still go through times of the most horrific, and yet at the core of it, it's a love. It's a coming together. It's wanting something that brings us together. And I think, when we talk with you, Frank, and for me, I know your music. I know what the music's about. It's hard to describe. That's why the documentary is so important, because people don't have a frame, and we need to give them a frame so that they can carry this forward, so we can get more people interested. The more stories get told, more love gets shared, right?
Uh-huh. And it's happening now, though. There are people today, younger people,
Yeah.
who we don't know about, who are doing this very thing.
A lot of them.
Yeah. I want to thank you both. I do have one question I want to ask each of you, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
So much here. For the first time since 1994, I was able to take my turntable out of storage. And with it came my albums, my folk albums. Right? I realized how much I missed what they make me feel like. I want to ask each of you, what is your personal message? What do you want to leave people with here today?
The fact that we can survive, and not just survive, but we're not only able to survive, we can, what's the other word I'm looking for? We can live, I guess. We can live in peace and harmony. And as long as we have this concept in our minds and we don't let go of it, we can manifest it somehow. And we can do it in our own little ways. I guess Voltaire says, cultivate your garden. But because the best of all possible worlds is not here. But we can do that in our own way. We can do in our own lives. We can keep that optimistic vision of a world that's in harmony and peace, and people talking to each other and sharing with each other. And even people say, oh, you're just that's a pipe dream. Or, as Joe Hill used to say, pie in the sky. It's not. It's real, and it's in our minds. And if we can keep that truth in our mind active, that we can have a better world. And I really believe that. And I believe, like Pete did, and I always believed, a song can change the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Bert, how
Wow.
about you?
It's very hard to add anything.
I was
to
just
that.
going to say.
But, we just need to keep telling the stories, and we need to keep the music alive, and that will change the world.
Please give out that website again so people can stay in touch with you.
FrankHamilton.net.
Mark,
Fantastic. I want to thank you, Frank. I want to thank you, Bert, and of course, Dr. Pat. And we have the most incredible audience in the world. So please go to frankhamilton.net. Don't miss this documentary. It is absolutely astonishing, fantastic. And Dr. Pat and I will be back next week. We'll be taking calls from listeners next week. And I want to once again thank you, Frank, and thank you, Bert, for a very special show.
Very honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for reminding me again, and all of the people listening, what hope feels like. What hope feels like.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on. We'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into The Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on The Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.